Hello everyone! Have you ever seen one of these? A clunky, heavy machine with a keyboard that looks oddly familiar yet strangely out of place. This is a typewriter. Before sleek laptops and silent keyboards, this was the sound of creation, the engine of words. Picture this. It's the early evening, a desk lamp casts a warm glow, and the only sound is the rhythmic clack 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 of keys striking paper. That sound wasn't just noise. It was the sound of ideas taking physical form, one letter at a time. It wasn't just a tool. It was a presence, a solid, dependable partner sitting on your desk, ready to capture your thoughts. The first time you see one, you can't help but be curious. What are all these levers for? And why does it weigh so much? Let's take a journey back in time and explore the world of the typewriter together. So, how did this mechanical marvel actually work? It was all about physics, a beautiful, tangible process. First, you had to load the paper. You'd carefully feed a crisp, blank sheet behind a rubber roller called the platen. Then, you'd turn one of the knobs on the side, and with a satisfying ratchet-like sound, the paper would roll up and into position, held tight and ready for your first word. Now, for the magic. When you pressed a key, let's say the letter A, whole chain reaction started. The key lever would swing a metal arm, called a type bar, upward. At the very tip of that arm was the character A, in reverse. This arm would fly up and strike an inked ribbon, which was stretched right in front of the paper. And just for a split second, the ribbon would press against the paper, leaving a perfect little behind. Whack! One letter, born. You'd type along, watching the carriage, the whole top part holding the paper, move one space to the left with each keystroke. Clack, clack, clack. As you neared the end of the line, a small bell would ring. Ding! That was your cue. It was the typewriter's way of saying, "Hey, time for a new line." And you'd respond by pushing the carriage return lever. With one swift motion, swoosh thunk, the carriage would slide all the way back to the right, and the paper would automatically advance one line down. It was a physical, almost athletic interaction. You weren't just typing. You were operating a machine, a partner in the act of writing. Every part had a purpose, from the shift key that physically lifted the type basket to switch to capitals, to the backspace key that just moved the carriage back one space, not erasing a thing. It was ingenious, really. A symphony of gears, springs, and levers, all working in harmony. The typewriter wasn't just a clever invention. It completely revolutionized culture and the workplace. Suddenly, communication became faster and clearer. Imagine the business world before typewriters, everything handwritten. A typed letter was professional, uniform, and easy to read. Offices were filled with the clatter of typing pools, rows of typists creating documents that would build modern commerce. This machine also opened up new career paths, particularly for women, who became essential to the functioning of every office. But it wasn't just for business. At home, the typewriter became a personal tool. People typed letters to loved ones far away, students typed their school reports, and aspiring authors poured their souls onto the page. Think of the great writers. Mark Twain was one of the first authors to submit a typed manuscript. Ernest Hemingway stood at his royal typewriter, punching out his minimalist prose. Jack Kerouac famously typed on the road on a continuous scroll of paper, to avoid interrupting his creative flow. The typewriter was the trusted companion of storytellers, poets, and journalists. It democratized the written word, making it possible for anyone with a story to tell to present it in a clean, professional format. It sat in the corner of the study, a silent witness to family histories, business deals, and the birth of literary classics. Of course, using a typewriter wasn't always a walk in the park. It came with its own set of unique challenges that would make us modern computer users shudder. Let's talk about the biggest one: mistakes. There was no delete key, no backspace that magically erased your error. If you typed the wrong letter, you had a few options, none of them perfect. You could try to use a special typewriter eraser, a gritty wheel that would scrape the ink off the paper, often leaving a smudged, torn mess. Or, you could use correction fluid, that little white bottle of paint that you'd dab over the mistake. Then you'd wait for it to dry, roll the paper back into the exact right spot, which was a skill in itself, and type the correct letter on top. It was a process. Making a mistake felt significant. It was a permanent blemish on a once perfect page. This forced you to think before you typed, to be deliberate and focused. And then there was the noise. We mentioned the satisfying clack, but imagine an entire office full of them. It was a cacophony, a constant metallic chatter that defined the sound of a 20th century workplace. And these machines were heavy. They were made of solid metal. A portable typewriter was portable in name only. It came in a hard case with a handle, but you'd feel it in your arm after carrying it a few blocks. Your fingers would get a workout too. The keys required real pressure. After a long typing session, your fingertips would feel tender. And let's not forget the ribbon. The ink would eventually run out, and changing it was a messy job. You'd have to wind the new ribbon through a series of tiny, intricate guides, and you were almost guaranteed to get black or red ink all over your fingers. But you know what? All these quirks and challenges were part of the experience. It made writing a craft, not just a task. Despite the challenges, there's a deep sense of nostalgia and fondness for these machines. It's about the tactile experience. The feeling of the keys pushing back against your fingers, the solid connection between your thought, your touch, and the word appearing on the page. It's a multi-sensory experience. You see the letter appear, you hear the clack of the type bar, and you feel the vibration through the machine. And that ding, that little bell at the end of the line is one of the most iconic sounds of the 20th century. It wasn't an annoying notification. It was a satisfying signal of progress, a little reward for completing another line of thought. Families would often have one typewriter that was used for decades. It would be passed down, used for homework, for letters to grandparents, for the first draft of a novel. These machines were built to last. They were witnesses to family life, holding the faint imprint of countless stories. Finding an old typewriter in an attic today is like finding a time capsule. You can almost feel the history in its keys, the echoes of all the words it helped bring into the world. It's a connection to a slower, more deliberate way of living and creating. Then, change began to whisper on the wind. The late 1970s and 80s brought the dawn of a new era, the personal computer. At first, typewriters and computers coexisted. Word processors were expensive and complicated. But as technology advanced, computers became smaller, cheaper, and more user-friendly. The advantages were undeniable. The ability to delete and edit text effortlessly was a game changer. You could save your work on a floppy disk, copy and paste paragraphs, and experiment without fear of permanent mistakes. The noisy, mechanical clatter of the office was gradually replaced by the quiet tapping of computer keyboards. The transition was slow at first, then rapid. Businesses upgraded, and soon, the typewriter was relegated to the closet, then the basement, and finally, the antique shop. For a while, the electric typewriter held on, offering a lighter touch and a few more features, but it was just a bridge to the inevitable digital future. The disappearance of the typewriter marked the end of an era. We gained incredible efficiency, but perhaps we lost something to that tangible connection to the act of writing. So, what did the typewriter teach us? Looking back, it taught us patience. When every mistake was costly, you learned to slow down, to compose your thoughts carefully before committing them to paper. It forced a kind of mindfulness that is often lost in the age of endless drafts and easy edits. It taught us about the beauty of imperfection. A typed page, with its occasional slightly misaligned letter or faint correction, had character. It was human. It showed the process, the effort involved. The finality of the printed letter also gave our words a certain weight and significance. Most importantly, the typewriter reminds us that the tool we use shapes the work we create. The physical effort, the linear process, the focus it demanded, all of this influenced the writer's voice. It encouraged clear, direct thinking. Today, as we type silently on glass screens, it's worth remembering that clunky, noisy machine. It reminds us that writing is not just about information, but about craft, intention, and the beautiful, messy process of turning fleeting thoughts into something real and lasting. Thank you so much for joining me on this trip down memory lane. It's fascinating how a simple machine can hold so much history and meaning. What are your memories of typewriters? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more stories about the amazing history of technology and culture. See you next time.